No Buzz, a Just Bees book club. Today we're talking on the origin of species and other stories by Bo-Young Kim, an author who I quite like. I think my like high level pitch to everyone I've talked about this. I read this about a little less than a month ago. At this point, it's been especially a very weird like week and a half. But my high level pitch is like Kim Bo-young, I think, is she's a South Korean author. This book specifically was put out by Kaya Press, I believe, in 2010. Kaya Press is great. I went to one of their launches around that time. It was probably like 2014-ish, 2013, 2014, over in San Francisco. I think they're an LA-based press that focuses on Asian American authors and Asian authors in translation. Um, she has a much more recent book called I'm Waiting for You and Other Stories, which is also very good, probably more accessible. It's like a collection of four short stories. The first two in the collection are linked together, and then the middle two in the collection are linked together. Um, that book is great. I read it a couple years ago, I guess at this point, probably maybe not long before I started this whole situation. But I just finished On the Origin of Species, her earlier collection. This is like a proper collection, not just four sort of novellas that are interlinked. Basically, two short novels split up in an interesting way. That book's great. You should read that book. This book, also great. A little more hit and miss, I think. But when it hits, it really hits. I'll sort of go through this just very quickly. It opens with uh, an author's introduction called A Brief Reflection on Breasts that is sort of trying to make the argument. It seems as though, um, women have breasts, and so when people identify a person with breasts, they think of it as a woman. In the similar way to when people see science in a story, that they think of it as science fiction. Um, I'm not sure it's a particularly rigorous account of science fiction, but it seems more of a statement about how, while she is a science fiction writer, she doesn't necessarily position her stories that way in her head prior to writing them out. I found the metaphor a little weird. I don't know. That's hi. Bodies. You know. The first story in the collection is called Scriptor. Oh, I didn't even say the thing that I was gonna say that I was gonna say. The high level pitch I've given to people about this book and I'm Waiting for You is um, I think Kim Bo Young might be my favorite current science fiction writer who is like a capital L, capital I literature of ideas science fiction person. Um, Her stories always start out with like a big hooky what if in them, and then the development of the story is not so much about plot development or character development as such. It's more about um, taking those ideas and working with them through character and plot to sort of sharpen them or make them more interesting, or et cetera, et cetera. And I think she does it really, really fantastically. Like her stories are focused on the ideas that they are premised upon, and they almost always come out really, really good in my experience, having now read two of her books, which I believe are the only two available in English. First story in this is called Scriptor. It sort of follows a man who works for a company that has acquired this virtual reality, massively multiplayer online role-playing game that has this weird clause in it that says like, if anyone is still in it, you can't shut it down, basically. And there's like this one person who's been in there since day one, and it's sort of this corporate, sort of high-level corporate dude goes into the game and like continually tries to convince this guy to log out. And then there's some machinations with like, oh, is there another person in here, or is this like a really, really elaborately scripted AI? Because like the person who has been playing this game is known to have been a hacker in like prior to becoming this recluse within the game. Um, it's interesting. Like I said, it's really good ideas. The characters themselves are in service to those ideas, and I think it does that pretty well. Next story is one of my lesser favorite ones, Between Zero and One. It's about a young girl who is grappling with like relativity and sort of Zeno's paradox almost in a weird way. I think that's the right one. Um, the half and half again one. If I'm getting the wrong paradox, I apologize. I did not research this ahead of time. I just kind of started talking. That's kind of the no buzz promise. A bee talks to bees only, and if you're not a bee, it's very rude of you to be watching. Um, it's like a time travel story about like a woman like in three different parts of her life and the way that time travel can and can't work, and it's about suicidal ideation also. I found it fine. I found it fine. I'm not a time travel person, so an evolutionary myth is the next one, and this one rules. This was just a fun read. It's like some sort of far future society where evolution is like happens real fast. Like within the course of it, you can evolve into different things within the course of like a few years. Like so whole evolutionary tracks that would have taken millions of years can happen over the course of a handful of years now. So people like a lot of people are walking around with their backs bent at the waist because of there's some sort of subservience. There's talk about why people evolve in the ways they do and how that often isn't in line with what they think they want or how they think they act, but it is more than it isn't. And it ends in a big dragon, and that's cool. I mentioned dragons because the next story is Last of the Wolves, a big dragon story. People have become pets to dragons, and it follows one in particular who sort of wants to escape from their masters and engages with the wolves, who are like the group of humans who are actively trying to fight back, and engages with like questions of desire to please versus desire to revolt in a really neat way. But other than that, it's a solid story. And we get to the final three. We get to the title story on the origin of species, which is a far future in which humanity has completely been wiped off the face of the earth. All organic life has been wiped off the face of the earth, in fact. And our characters are robots who were created by humanity but have no memory of humanity at all. And it follows one specific robot named K, I believe. Let's see. Yeah, K, who is sort of like struggling through school and gets approached by another robot who's like, "Hey, are you K? You wrote this like paper a few years ago uh, that K remembers getting like a D on or whatever that is like informed this whole new subsection of uh, um, what they call, or I believe, organic biology, because in their culture, there's no such thing as their biology is fundamentally about inorganic life forms like robots, and their fundamental understanding of life involves uh, inorganic materials being using electricity and circuits to become life. And so the very idea that there could be such a thing as organic life is this deeply heretical idea. And Kay sort of gets involved in that, and there's like visions of the future of organic life when they learn to start growing uh, plant life, basically. It's really cool. It is well named after this story. This is like a really good example of Kim Bo Young in longer form doing a big ideas thing and dragging it through a bunch of different situations and people in ways that just continues to make it more and more interesting and exciting. Um, it gets followed up in a second, and a story I'm a little less hyped on. But before that, between those two, we actually get Stars Shine in Earth's Sky, which is a really short story. It's what starts 226, ends 242, so it's 15-ish pages. Um, I really love it. Like this is the one I had been enjoying this book up until that point, up until the point where I read Stars Shine in Earth's Sky, and this one it was just like made everything fucking click for me. If there's a way to find it online, I'm sure it's been published somewhere because it's a shorter thing, or if it hasn't, it should be. Somebody should pick that up. Um, it's a little complicated, right? It's an epistolary story, but it's just one epistle. It is a person. writing home to their brother, um, like in response to a letter we don't see on the page. That is basically like, hey, I'm sorry we haven't talked in a long time, but my parents think I need to get I need to undergo treatment for this thing that I have, but I don't want to because I have learned to live with it, and I think it makes my life better. And here is sort of my reasoning for that, and here are some of the ways that I have engaged with this like alleged um, uh, disability or disease, and here's like the galactic reasoning uh, behind the story. I think it's really handled well. I don't think it's like you need to read this to like as a part of a disability studies course or anything like that. I think it's just like handled intelligently. I'm in Los Angeles right now, which is why I'm so sweaty. Um, I think that stuff is just handled elegantly. That the story that Kim Bo Young is trying to tell is one about the ways in which uh, society constructs the ways in which our bodies react to the world uh, along different lines. Um, and also, the story she's trying to tell is about a civilization that lives at the galactic core, where it's never night. So, the thing that this narrator is supposed to be getting treatment for is basically like sleeping 8 hours a day. And I don't know, it was just it's just written in such a way that it's like really cool, and like the reveals aren't like, it's not like a big like, my god, here's this twist. It's like just like coming naturally over the course of this written letter, and like working through the arguments that people have had over the centuries or whatever. And it's all in relation to this message they get from outside, or from outside their solar system, that just says Earth shine in, or stars shine in Earth's sky, and they just goes through this whole debate that was had for like a century or whatever about like what could that possibly mean, and the way that got resolved is really good. Just like a really 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 masterful short story in my opinion. One of the best I've read in a really long time, and I'm not a huge short story person, but I like a short story every once in a while. And then the final story is On the Origin of Species and M dash and what might have happened thereafter. So the final story in this brings back Kay from On the Origin of Species. She has kind of pieced out of the organic biology deal, and is off doing her own thing when she gets visited by somebody who's like, hey, everyone who goes into that lab now refuses to leave, and they're all doing it under no apparent like blackmail or pressure or anything. They just immediately dedicate their life to it, and you're the only person who's ever gotten out. And so she eventually goes back to the lab, and I guess spoilers, she discovers that they've basically reconstructed humans, and so they're like the three laws of robotics, like the Asimov three laws of robotics, immediately kicked in, and they like became these like uh, I'm gonna spoil this whole story. Just saying that up front. I this is the thing I just said is a small spoiler, but I'm leading up to a much larger one. So if you are convinced to read this book and you do not like spoilers, that's cool. Uh, See ya. You're not if you're a bee. If you're not a bee, then very rude. Um, so the people in this lab have gone from, in the last like 30 years or whatever, between these two stories, have gone from just making very basic plant life to figuring out how to evolve humans. And so there's a bunch of infants in this lab, and the three laws of robotics make it such that they immediately switch on this super protective instinct that their whole existence sort of dovetails into this idea that like their only purpose in life is to protect these things. Um, Hey, it turns out, and this is the big spoiler. Um, I was okay here again, giving you a second here. Up to this point in the story, I was like, I didn't really need this. This like follow up is like cool, but it's not. especially after Stars Shine and Earth Sky, I was like, this is like a little bloated. There's like a lot of just like stuff going back and forth, and I still really appreciate the conceit, but it's like kind of overstaying its welcome with this character of Kay and some of the others, and it's just not like it's just not her strength. And then this reveal happens. This reveal about who Kay is fundamentally, about what kind of robot Kay was built to be, which is to say, one that does not have the three laws of robotics, or at least the part that says you cannot harm a human. Um, and Kay sort of comes to this realization that she's like, oh, well, if there were a bunch of these, and there were like these were humans who had to do things like police themselves because they fundamentally need to like consume other things in order to live. That's the whole deal with organic matter. There was probably like conflict that they needed certain robots to be able to handle. So she realizes that in some far, far distant past that is still relevant, she was basically built to be a cop or a, military robot, a PMC sort of deal. And she realizes that she can kill humans. And she does. She, like, fucking kills a bunch of children. Um, and that move from this, like, high concept, not super interesting character story to a no, let's take this all like let's take this concept all the fucking way. Like what kinds of robots were actually going would be created that were, humanoid robots in this style, and what would it mean for one of them to not have this immediate impulsive desire to please humans. What would she do? Because she can see that organic life grows. It might be very fragile, but it is very, very prolific. And she can see that her society is basically coming to an end if this is allowed to continue. Like, not just because it's so prolific, but because every robot, except for her and presumably others, specifically within her model or whatever, immediately begin paying obeisance to these creatures. Um, and so they will terraform their whole built environment. The other part of this is like the sort of premise of on the origin species is like climate or global warming happened to such a degree that ice caps melted, and then um, there was an ice age, and then a brutal, and that led to a brutal heat. But factories kept pumping out uh, robots, so there was there's basically the Earth is just a blanket in smog to such a degree that nothing organic can live there. And yeah, the the way she jumps from like this is an interesting premise to here's like the story to kind of lagging a little bit toward the middle there. If you take those two stories as one complete whole, I guess, if, you know, which is not how they're presented, to just ramping it the fuck back up and being like, here is some character motivation made brutal. Uh, and that's the end of the book, and I really quite liked it. Yeah, I think Kim Bo Young is like an absolute treasure of a writer, and I'm looking forward to anything else of hers getting translated and to reading that when it does. And that is that. Hey, bring it in. Thanks for not watching.